Hi, thank you for joining us in this week's video. Throughout the last week, we did receive the updated forgiveness application, updated guidance around that application, and some additional interim final rules. There are two major aspects as you are moving through the utilization of your PPP funds that I want you to be aware of. So today we're going to talk about the new restrictions on owner cash compensation. We're going to talk about the owner payroll costs, so those payroll cost elements that are not cash compensation. When we did our last video, we talked about the addition of a FTE reduction exemption. In the actual application for forgiveness itself, that is moved to a safe harbor. And I'll talk about the significance there because it can dictate our timeline and it will give us a much easier path towards our forgiveness. So first, we're going to talk about owner cash compensation limits. When we looked at and applied for the PPP, they used 2.5 months worth of your payroll costs, and we have not seen that timeline come back up again until now. And I think one of the major reasons that we see that, and one of the reasons that they identified utilizing that timeline in the interim final ruling, was to kind of pull back on having a windfall for owners with the PPP and ensuring that there are additional dollars that go to staff. And I'll talk about why that's important in light of this new safe harbor in just a moment, but first, kind of to the hard numbers there. So for owners' cash compensation, and they bring in S-corps, they bring in sole props, they bring in partnerships, really cover all of their bases. If you are an owner, your maximum cash compensation is going to be 2.5 months of that $100,000 cap. So $100,000 divided by 12 multiplied by 2.5 gives us $20,833. That's the maximum amount as an owner you can seek forgiveness for. That does not apply to any other employee in your practice. So if you've got an associate that has a guarantee of over $100,000 or $100,000, they get to utilize and you get to seek forgiveness for the compensation based off of the weekly calculation. So 100,000 divided by 52 multiplied by 24 gives us that $46,154. And again, that's going to apply to anybody who is reaching that $100,000 cap who is not an owner. If you are an owner, you're going to have a cap of $20,833. So what about the aspects of payroll costs that aren't cash compensation? For health benefits, in the forgiveness application itself, it asks us to disallow any health care benefits for self-employed, general partners, or owner employees of an S-corp. So they essentially cover all owners are going to be excluded from having their health care benefits forgiven in the PPP. On retirement benefits, that owner-employee aspect of an S-corp is not defined in the forgiveness application. Don't want to necessarily assume that that means S-corp owners are going to be able to fund up their retirement. It very much looks like that's going to be the case, though, in that they can seek forgiveness for it. One of the things that we talked about in some of our prior videos after we had this expanded timeline, though, was really focus on the cash compensation elements of it to exhaust your PPP funds to keep the record keeping as straightforward and as easy as possible. For your non-owners, though, that non-cash payroll cost element, they still get to include their health care benefits that you pay as the owner or that the practice pays for them, as well as what the practice does for their retirement benefits. That continues to be on top of that $100,000 cash compensation. So not a lot of movement there. And the way that health care benefits are treated, brought in that S-corp to exclude, but that was always the case on the sole prop side of things. Now I want to talk a little bit about this FTE reduction exemption and safe harbor. In our last video, we talked about a new exemption, and that was the inability to return to the same level of business activity due to a requirement or guidance by HHS, CDC, or OSHA. So a really nice broad exemption. Well, what you can see in this slide is that's now moved up to being a safe harbor. Why is that important? I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but it is important because if you can check the box for any of the safe harbors, you can skip lines 11 and 12. Now, obviously without context, that doesn't mean a lot. Lines 11 and 12 are the FTE calculations. So having the fact that the majority of your practices were shut down for a period of time, that's going to, and we'll hone in now on that safe harbor language, that does provide us the opportunity to say we were unable to operate between February 15th in 2020 to the end of the year at the same level of business activity as we were prior to February 15th of 2020 due to compliance with requirements or guidance, so a broad term there that came out after March 1st and will take us all the way to the end of the year. So the fact that your practice was shut down gives you the opportunity to check this box, gives us the safe harbor to be able to move forward without having to worry about that FTE calculation. So there is no threshold in terms of what that business activity means, and it's not tied to revenue. So unlike a lot of pieces of the CARES Act, there's not this kind of math we have to do to see if that applies to us. The check the box, as I mentioned, allows us not to do the calculation and likely allows us to seek early forgiveness because we won't have to report on or calculate the average number of employees that we have over this 24-week covered period. That's an item that we're taking a good look at. We're making sure we're keeping our eyes on, because I have not yet seen them explicitly state you can file for forgiveness prior to the end of your covered period. Moving this exemption to a safe harbor does give us the sense that that's going to be the case. So kind of the bad news in terms of how it is that $100,000 cap is going to apply to you as an owner, but the very good news in terms of having that exemption reduction moved up and be treated as a safe harbor and specifically as a check the box safe harbor. If you're looking at any of these loan applications or the forgiveness application, or as you're seeing some of these rules come out, if you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email. Please feel free to give us a phone call. We look forward to making sure that we can guide us all through to get the most PPP forgiveness possible and leverage all of the other aspects of the CARES Act. Thank you very much.